What if a widely held religious belief was one of the most powerful geopolitical forces of our time? What if a specific interpretation of ancient scripture was shaping foreign policy, justifying conflict, and determining the fate of nations in the 21st century? This is the story of Christian Zionism. For millions, it's a devout expression of faith, a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. But there is a powerful argument to be made that it is also something else, a dangerous political ideology that serves as a theological tool for empire. Today, we're going on a deep dive. We will unpack how this movement distorts Scripture, how it's used to manufacture enemies and provide cover for aggression, and what the real-world consequences are for all of us. This isn't just about religion. It's about war, politics, and the immense power of an idea to shape our world. So what is Christian Zionism? At its core, it's a belief held primarily within Protestant evangelical circles that the return of Jewish people to the historical land of Israel and the establishment of the modern Israeli state in 1948 is a direct fulfillment of biblical prophecy. For its adherents, this isn't just a political event, it's a divine one. They believe it's a crucial step on the path to the end times and the second coming of Jesus Christ. This belief system creates an imperative to support the state of Israel, often unconditionally, as a way of aligning with God's plan. The Christian Zionism, while framed as a matter of faith, operates as a potent geopolitical tool. We'll investigate the claim that it serves the ambitions of empire, particularly American foreign policy, by providing a divine mandate for what are, in reality, political and strategic objectives. We'll examine the scriptural basis for this movement and how it's allegedly distorted. We'll look at its historical use in framing geopolitical adversaries. We'll test its core promise of blessing against the state of the world today. And finally, we will confront the human cost of this ideology, especially for those living in the heart of the conflict. The theological bedrock of Christian Zionism can be found in a single, powerful verse from the book of Genesis. It's a promise God makes to the patriarch Abraham. You have likely heard it quoted by pastors and politicians alike. Genesis 12, verse 3. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curse thee. For Christian Zionists, the V in this verse is interpreted as not just Abraham, but his descendants, the Jewish people, and by extension, the modern nation-state of Israel. The message is simple and direct. A nation's fortune is directly tied to its political support for Israel. To bless Israel is to be blessed by God. To curse Israel is to be cursed by God. This is a deliberate and misleading truncation of Scripture, a theological sleight of hand. The verse doesn't end there. It continues, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. This final clause changes everything. According to traditional Christian theology, as explained by the Apostle Paul in the New Testament book of Galatians, this promise points directly to a single seed of Abraham, Jesus Christ. The blessing is not exclusive, nationalistic, or political. It's a universal messianic promise of reconciliation for all families of the earth through Christ. By omitting this crucial part of the verse, a universal message of salvation is transformed into a political litmus test. It shifts the focus from Christ to a modern nation-state. This interpretation isn't ancient. It's a relatively modern phenomenon, emerging in the late 19th century, right alongside the rise of political Zionism. This parallel development is key, suggests an ideology created not in ancient Jerusalem, but in the crucible of modern geopolitics, perfectly tailored to the ideological needs of the moment. The United States has been at war for nearly 95% of its existence. This reality requires a powerful and enduring justification, an endless war doctrine. The Christian Zionism provides the perfect theological cover for this. How? By creating a narrative where geopolitical conflicts are not just about resources, territory, or power, but are cosmic battles between good and evil. When a nation's foreign policy is framed as a fulfillment of divine prophecy, it becomes sanctified. Questioning a military intervention or a multi-billion-dollar aid package is no longer just a political disagreement. It borders on questioning God's will. This worldview thrives on biblical illiteracy. When congregations are not encouraged to engage in deep, critical study of the Scriptures in their full context, they become more susceptible to simplistic, weaponized interpretations. Scripture ceases to be a sacred text to be wrestled with, and instead becomes a pliable, Tula divine rubber stamp for the ambitions of empire. This allows for the confection of new enemies. Geopolitical rivals are no longer just strategic competitors. They can be cast as ancient biblical villains, making diplomatic solutions seem naive and military confrontations seem righteous. Let's look at a prime example from history, the Cold War. After World War II, when the Soviet Union became the first nation to grant de jure recognition to Israel, it didn't fit the neat theological box. But that soon changed. Christian Zionist leaders began feverishly mining the prophecies of the Old Testament, particularly the book of Ezekiel. There, they found their villain. They cast the officially atheistic Soviet Union, and Russia in particular, as the apocalyptic aggressor, Gog of the land of Magog, a force from the far north, destined to invade Israel in the last days. This interpretation wasn't confined to fringe prophecy circles. President Ronald Reagan, the icon of American conservatism, repeatedly invoked this idea. He framed the Cold War not as a political and economic struggle between two superpowers, but as a cosmic battle against an evil empire. To this day, this framing continues to influence how millions of American evangelicals view Russia as an eternal, predestined enemy of God. This pattern of manufacturing enemies continues. The text points to rhetoric that dehumanizes Arabs, particularly Palestinians, as modern-day orcs, fantasy monsters to be vanquished. This stands in stark contrast to historical Jewish scripture, which often depicts Persians, modern-day Iranians, in a favorable light. The current animosity is therefore presented not as a theological necessity, but as a modern geopolitical aberration that requires a theological justification. An enemy is needed for the script, and one is always found. Let's return to that core promise of Genesis 12:3. I will bless those who bless you. If we take the Christian Zionist interpretation at face value that this is a mandate for state-level foreign policy, then the evidence of this blessing should be overwhelming in the nations that are Israel's most loyal allies. But is it? Let's take a honestly look at the United States, a nation more politically polarized than at any time since its civil war, a country struggling with decaying cities, rampant drug addiction, and racial tensions at a boiling point. A place where nearly 40% of the population cannot afford a simple $400 emergency. Yet year after year, billions of dollars in unconditional aid flow to Israel. Western Europe, another bastion of support, faces its own crises. Deepening political polarization, a loss of faith in institutions, and escalating cultural clashes. Social cohesion appears to be unraveling across the transatlantic alliance. Now, let's compare that to East and Southeast Asia, a region of 2.4 billion people. The vast majority of these countries maintain a measured, neutral stance on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Most support a two-state solution based on pre-1967 borders. There is no political imperative to offer unconditional support to Israel. And the result? This region is strikingly more stable. With few exceptions, there are no continent-wide wars or the kind of existential societal fractures plaguing the West. Social harmony is comparatively intact. So the question practically asks itself, if Genesis 12:3 is a foreign policy scorecard, then who exactly is being blessed and who is being cursed? The evidence on the ground seems to directly contradict the promise. The consequences of this ideology are not just economic or social. They are measured in human lives, like the genocide ongoing on Gaza's Strip. There is a blind allegiance to the modern state of Israel, fueled by Christian Zionist theology, has devastating effects on the ground. It points to the war in Syria, alleging that Israeli strategic calculations led to support for various factions, including jihadist groups that have contributed to the decimation of the region's ancient ethnic and religious minorities. The ultimate and most bitter irony is that an ideology claiming to be Christian actively endangers the world's oldest Christian communities, the living stones, the indigenous Christians of the Middle East who trace their roots back to the time of Christ, often the direct victims of the conflicts fanned by this geopolitical theology. When the modern state of Israel is idolized and current events are force-fit into a contrived apocalyptic script, actual Christian communities become disposable. They're sacrificed on the altars of geopolitics and eschatological fantasy. Quoting the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians, "Have no fellowship with these murderous idolaters." It's a harsh condemnation, born from the belief that Christian Zionism has replaced the worship of Christ with the worship of empire and state power. So, where does this leave us? We've explored the argument that Christian Zionism is a powerful political ideology, a theological counterfeit that serves the ambitions of empire. We've seen how it allegedly distorts Scripture to create a political mandate, manufactures enemies to fit an apocalyptic script, and provides theological cover for geopolitical aggression. We've examined the claim that its promises of blessing ring hollow in the face of reality, and we've confronted its devastating human cost, especially for neighbors of the supposed promised land. The purpose of this analysis is not to attack anyone's personal faith. It is to encourage critical thinking. It is a call to examine the ideologies that shape our world, especially those that wrap themselves in the mantle of divine will. When faith becomes a tool of the state, when love for a neighbor is replaced by allegiance to a political strategy, and when the universal message of peace is sacrificed for a narrative of endless war, we must ask ourselves a difficult question. What are we really worshiping? God or imperialism? And don't forget, like the video and subscribe the channel to keep thinking the world how it really is.